Welcome to Gemini12. In this video series, I will be demonstrating Gemini12's features and explain what it can do. So let's start by introducing Gemini12. Gemini12 is a client-server based solution for printing that can be installed on-site on a lease basis and has some very unique features like art on demand without running the risk of your files going somewhere where you don't want them to end up. So let's start with the beginning. We will cover every part of using and installing and all the features. So let's start with system requirements. Obviously we need to install a server before you can start printing, but we take care of that. We just install the server and that is ready to print almost when we place it. And that's hooked up to your network and to the printers that we provide. So then you need to print from your workstations, which can be Mac or Windows. So we can support both, and we have a client called Titan, which runs on both Mac and Windows, but it does have, of course, system requirements. They're not strict. You can run basically Titan on any computer that is modern and runs applications like Photoshop well. So actual system requirements for Windows are Windows 7 and up, and we prefer to use the Pro version because it has no limitations. The home version has some limitations, and for Mac it would be 10.7 as an operating system. So pretty much anything that's built in the last 5 years is going to work. Let's take a look at installation. Now for me to show you how things work, I can share my screen with you. So we're looking at my Mac screen here. I'll be demonstrating all the features and installation on Mac, and then afterwards I will create a video for Windows to explain the differences. Feature wise, there's no difference between the Mac and the Windows version of Titan, but it of course looks somewhat different because it's different operating systems and the procedures are slightly different for each. Okay, so let's start with Titan installation. We have already the installer here downloaded and placed on our desktop. The installer you can get from Gemini systems, so if you don't have the link to it, contact us and we'll provide you a link to download the client. You can even install the client if you don't have a server yet. So you can have a look at the features, but obviously you won't be able to print. So let's start with installation. We double click the installer and we click on continue and we select the main disk where our other applications are and click on install. Now of course we need to install something, so we need to provide our user information with a password. So we'll do that and it will install itself in just a matter of seconds. So that's done. So that's not hard to do. We're not exactly finished yet because there's a client server solution, so we need to be connected to the server. Now the server is on our network, and when we start Titan we can connect it up to the server. So let's launch it first. We can do that in several ways. You can go to your applications folder. I prefer to use the Launchpad because my applications folder's got a lot of applications. I go here and I start typing, and then when I type enough letters it will filter out the application I'm looking for. So it comes up with a splash screen, and once the interface is loaded, you might want to do this as a if you don't know that. You can click on the icon and in options you can choose keep in dock. It's not on by default, but if you do, then the next time Titan will be right in your dock, easier to launch. The interface of Titan has several parts. Let's start with the main window. There's only one window in the entire application. We've tried to keep it as simple as possible to use. So having multiple windows is always confusing because you never know which one has focus, and it always is more difficult. So it has one window, both on Mac and Windows. But it is a tabbed interface because there's many tabs here. The screen size, we can optimize the usage of the screen size in several ways. We can double click on the top bar, so double click here, and it will expand itself to the size of your screen. Not all applications do that, but I find it very handy that it does. You can also go full screen if you want by using the full screen button. But what I don't like about that is that you don't have access anymore to your menus at the top and you don't know what's going on anymore. So I prefer to use the maximized way of this screen setup. Then let's talk about the different parts of the interface. On the left there is a file browser, and below that is an image previewer, and they're obviously linked up. And whenever you see a dark line on the interface, if I hover my mouse over there, you can move those lines. So I can make this window bigger if I want by dragging it. And if I do make it bigger, a new menu appears there at the bottom, now saying none. Now let's explain how this file browser works. At the top we have a menu bar that can take us right to our own user, or to volumes, so whatever disks you have connected or having your local Mac. Or you go to predefined folders which are also added. So there's an Art on Demand folder which is pre-added, and there's 2 folders which are also added separately. Now how does that work? Let's start off with starting at a user and then choosing the desktop. As soon as I start choosing a folder, it will dig down. So if there's anything inside this folder that's an image, it will be shown. So let me show you that. By clicking on the wedding pictures, then I see these 5 pictures because they're inside this folder. Notice there's a little heart here. That's because it's a favorite. That means it's accessible directly from the menu because it's right here. If I want to remove that from favorites, I simply double click it and click OK to remove it. And now it's no longer in my top menu. So that's a way for you to easily get access to a folder that you use a lot but is somewhere hidden in your system. So we'll start, I'll put it back here, add to favorites, okay. And once you've selected a folder, the images within that folder show up. So these are within wedding pictures. If I go to a different folder like Gemini12, you see other files in there. So what can we do at the bottom side? We can see which pictures are there. So it only shows pictures that we can print because it's for printing. It wouldn't make sense to show you Excel files because you can't print those. You can enlarge the icon you see in the list, or you can make it smaller if you prefer. And you can size the columns. Also, you have the ability to choose more information. So if you want the file size in megabytes, you can show that information. Or you can have the file dimensions, which can be handy if you're looking for a specific version which was stored at a specific size. And it just allows you to quickly navigate to a file. Now the way you start working with those files, because you can see them, if we are on the free layout tab, I'll talk about the free layout tab more later on, we can choose one picture at a time. So we click on a picture and it's instantly shown in the large preview on the right, so we can actually decide how large to print it and what we want to do with it. If you want to use templates, and we'll talk about templates in another section, you can simply drag an image onto the template or more images. So there's different ways of interfacing with the Windows on Titan. But this is not the only way you can interface with it, and I'll show you when we get to the template and free layout how else I can open up images, or I can do it now even. There's a folder icon here. If I click on that, it opens up a requester that you would if you do file open. So you can go to pictures and then to whatever picture you want to have printed, you can click it and open it, and it loads up that picture specifically. So let's show that. Let's use this file, test file, say open, and there's my test file. So there's several ways of getting images onto the interface. The final way is if I minimize the size of the window. Oops, that's not minimize, that's maximize. I wanted to minimize it. Then I can make some room to get to another folder, and if I open up a folder, I can drag an image from the Finder onto my canvas, and it copies the file over from its original location. So that's a third way of getting your images onto the interface. So that's a file browser. Then at the top we see server, printer, paper. That is the top section, which is for choosing which printer and server you want and media you want to print to. Now it's empty because it's the first time we launched it and it doesn't know where the server is yet. We didn't make a connection with it. So to do that, you only need to do this once. So if you do it, you go to server and then you look in your computers and your shared folders for a folder that's called, or a computer that's called Gemini12. If I select it, I still won't have access because I need to connect to it with a specific user. So I do connect as, because it won't know all the local users on the network automatically. So as a guest, you could not access it, so you need to be a registered user, and you are registered using the username and password Gemini. And you might as well remember this in your keychain, so the next time it won't ask you. If you do connect, then it will actually talk to the server that's installed and then make a connection to it, and then show you the folder on that server that you have access to. So there we are. There's a Gemini folder. If we double click one of these, doesn't matter if you take the capital or the small letters, and then we say open, and now we do have a connection to the server. The difference being that now we can choose a printer, and once we've chosen a printer, we can choose a paper. So now we're actually ready to start doing some printing. And we also are connected to our printers. We can see that because now on the right hand side we can see the status of our different printers. So right here we can see that our 10,000 has a width of 1625 loaded. It has 2 active jobs, 15 archived, so already printed, and 0 at hold, and the same for all the other printers. So you can have up to 5 printers connected simultaneously using Gemini12. Now, because we use a client-server interface, there's also a server part. In this video series, I will not be concentrating on that. I'll probably make a different one on that later on. But what we do need to do is check that once we send a file, it actually has arrived, and if we need to change anything, like change the media that's loaded or something like that. For that, we have access to the server using the View Server button. Now when you click that, it makes a connection to the other Mac or your Mac Mini server that has the Gemini12 installed on it. So there we see the jobs that are in our queue, and we see the different printers that we have. So we have 4 printers here, and we have some jobs waiting here ready to be printed. Now the first time you connect to this, it might ask you again for a username and password. Again, that is Gemini. So the first time you enter it, and then afterwards it will always remember. So then you simply click on the View Server button, and it opens up a connection to your server. And you're actually now using your own mouse on your workstation to control the server. You can do that from both Mac and Windows, and you can do that with multiple users at the same time. Of course, you cannot move the mouse simultaneously, because if I tell it to move left and the other one tells it to move right, we start to interfere, so it kind of jiggles in the middle. So this is the server view. Let me first clean up so we know that new jobs are arriving. So I'll just clean up these by selecting them and removing the jobs. So this is just deleting files on the server. We don't need to do much else than just say to files, start printing them, nest them together, delete them. That's all we do here. And of course we set the media that's loaded in our printer. So for status, we can find the status of our printer here with the inks and the media that's loaded, and we can see which jobs are waiting to be printed. Same thing goes for other printers. We got some jobs here, so I'll delete those as well, so we have a nice clean interface to start with. So that's the right hand part of the interface. Then in the center part is a tabbed interface, and that's the most important interface, because that actually allows us to work on the files and define how we print them. Before we dig into how to use each one of them exactly, I want to first explain the difference between template and free layout printing. Now, free layout printing allows me to print a single file in any size, any way I want, quickly. I don't need to make a template for it, I can just send it over. The template allows me to do predefined work more quickly. So if I want to print 100 10 by 15s, it wouldn't make sense to send over 100 times one file and print it. I want to drag an entire folder maybe onto a template of 10 by 15 borderless and then say print. So that's something you use a template for. You do not use a template to save media. You do save media when you use a template, of course, but it's not the only way you save media. So maybe one that's not thought of as often but is very handy is when you use free layout, you can nest images together. That means that they'll be placed next to each other if they still fit on the paper that is selected in the printer. So if you print a small print on a wide roll and you print 4 of them, it will just place them next to each other, saving you paper and saving you the time of having to define a template. Because the problem with a template is it's never the correct size. It's never the correct amount of cells that you need on a piece of paper. It's never exactly the layout you want, unless you're doing repetitive jobs like 10 by 15s or a certain combination of prints on a sheet. Then it makes sense to do the nesting feature. As soon as you start printing on a roll, usually it makes more sense to use your free layout features. So that's the main difference. Let's show the free layout first. So we start off the interface with no file loaded with just the Gemini logo on there. And then we start selecting a file. So let's just pretend we want to print this file and we want to print it on a canvas that is 60 centimeters wide on our Epson 10,000. So let's first choose the printer and let's print. Well, we only have photo paper in here but right now, but for demonstration purpose I'll just use photo paper. Or now let me change that. I'll change to the P800, which can also print a canvas, and I know I have a canvas profile ready for that here. So in free layout I can now decide how large I want to print this. If I want to print this at 60 centimeters, then of course I need 60 centimeters available in my printer. This is a smaller printer, so let's go to a size that fits, like 400. And the minute I enter a value and leave that field, the height is also taken into account in proportion and the new resolution is calculated. So if we want to crop the image, that's also possible. But first let me show you some other features. The edge. If you want to print a canvas, it's nice to have a canvas edge printed as well, so it's not white. And you need some space anyway, because if you don't allow for space on the sides, you won't be able to mount it onto the frame. So we choose an edge. We could choose equal. I'll explain custom in a minute. And we can choose the size of the edge. So if we want 3 centimeters of edge, we do 30 millimeters. And you see a white edge around it. That's how quickly you can define a canvas print. Even nicer is to have that edge mirrored, so you don't have to be exact mounting the canvas onto the frame, because if you miss by half a millimeter you won't see if it's not white. If it is white you'll see it because you'll see a white line at the edge. And of course it's a lot faster to do it this way than you could ever do it in Photoshop. And you don't need to store it from Photoshop, you just do it here and print it. You can also choose a color, so if you don't want a mirrored but you want a color, you can choose color there and then pick a color from the color picker. You can pick any color you like, so make it any funky color you like, or you could simply say I want to pick a color that's inside my picture. So I take the measuring tool, I go to the color that I want to pick, click on it, say OK, and then it's that color. You can of course see what you're printing. So now, because I chose a 400 millimeter by 300 with a 30 edge, the print becomes 460 by 360. I can set the number of copies, I can add cut marks if I want to, which are always inside the page so they never expand the size of your print. And you cut them away so it's easy to cut. You can tell the printer to cut if it's a roll printer, and you can tell the printer to nest. So let me show you what that does in a minute. First, let me print this canvas to show you that it does do a canvas inner mirror. Let's use that one, and we'll just say print. What it does now, it actually compresses the file without loss, so it does a zip compression, and creates a file and sends it over to the server with a job ticket, so the server knows what to do with it. So basically, we now are ready to do something completely different. We don't have to wait for the server, it's on the server already. It could be printing automatically now if we run the server automatically. Or we can go to the View Server button and then start it manually, because on our P800 we will see that job, and here we are. That's the canvas we printed. Now the nesting feature, let me show you that. If we choose the P10000, there's no job here obviously, so if we wanted to nest this picture on the P10000, because that's a big roll printer, choose a paper again because we chose a different printer, we could say, okay, I want to print this without the mirror edge but with the white edge first, and let's say print, and then it would be a single print, so one print on the entire width of the paper. That would waste a lot of paper, so it would be wiser to use the nest feature on our next print. So we could choose a color for this one, let's make it red, and then print again with the nest feature on. So what it will do now, it will send over the job again with this time a red edge, and because nest is on, it will create a nest job from that, and I can see on the server what that looks like, because now I have on the server here a nest job, and that shows me that I've got one job in my nest, and this is the single job. So if I were to start this one, it would just get this print. This one is now waiting because it's not ready, because the nest is not full. So if I go back to my client and I do another one in a different color, so I choose this one will be blue, okay, and I'll print that one, and then I'll combine it with one that is slightly smaller. So let me wait for it to be transmitted, and then I'll do one that's actually 35, and do that again in a different color to see the difference more clearly. We'll do that in green. So you can define any size, any type of picture, as long as it's on the same media. You can nest them together, and you do print, and it's sent over to the server, and once it's ready I can go to View Server, and now we can see the nest job is actually ready, because it's now 77%, which is below the minimum percentage that we set for it to start. And now we can print those 3 jobs on a single row without even having to worry about creating a template for it. So it's a lot quicker to do it this way. And you still have influence on how it's printed on the roll, because you can double click it and you can say, okay, I want to have a different nest gap, so I want more space in between. I can just expand the space. You can make that 30 if you want, and then say okay, and that would just expand the size in between the nest. So if I click it again, you see there's a bigger space in between the file. So a lot of control on how things are printing without making it too complicated. Okay, so that was using the equal edge. We also have a custom edge. Sometimes you want to print something with an edge that is not the same size on each side of the picture. You may want to not center the picture in a frame, or you might not have a frame of the same aspect ratio as your print. So if you know the size of your print and you know the size of your frame, you can calculate the difference and then add those as white spaces. So I'll first set this to white, and then for instance at the top I could have 10 millimeters, at the sides I could have 30, and at the bottom I could have 50. So that's a very quick way of defining a custom layout with white spaces around your image. So you don't need to worry about how am I going to fit it on to the exact frame. So that's a way to do that. Let me print that over to show you that that also works. Then if you want to print only a selection of your file, there's a crop feature. So if I start to choose crop, I can define the cropped area. So I can say, for instance, I want a square print, so I'll make this 262 as well. Now I have a square selection here that I can drag onto the screen. I can choose which part of the picture I want, so I'll just center these two. And if I want to add an equal space to that, I can go equal, and I can say give me 20 millimeters on that. Now it doesn't show you a square picture because you want to be able to see where you're cropping. It does show you a white edge of 20, and you know 20 is going to be 20, so when you send this over as well, it will actually make a square print of 262 with a added 20 millimeter white edge around it. So go to the server, see if all the files that I've sent over are actually there. We've got a second nest because we're still nesting. So this is the latest jobs that we sent, and then we can see here that if we double click on this nest, we can see this job is actually the one with the white space that is a square. So it all works, and this is the one with the edges that are custom defined. Once you're ready to start printing, you could simply say start the queue, and then it would print anything that's printable, so anything that is compatible with this currently selected paper and the size of the paper. Anything that's not compatible will be placed onto hold. I can also do it differently, not automatically launching it, by using control click and then say print job. Or hold it if I want to start the server on every job but this one. There's many ways to control it. Okay, that's the equal edge. Then of course we can set the number of copies. That means you can print as many copies as you like, of course. And the cut feature, I don't know if I mentioned that, we can choose to have it cut after we print yes or no. So if we don't want to cut, for instance, but because we want to laminate, we could say don't cut. Or we may print one sheet and we don't want it to drop immediately after printing. We could say don't cut, and I could just print and then walk over to the printer once it's finished and then manually cut it. Okay, that is the free layout printing. Next is template printing. So templates are predefined ways in which you print, and those are usually ways in which you print many times. So instead of you defining, okay, I need to print these 2 files on a sheet and I have 30 files to print, so I'll do that one by one, you make a template once of how you want the page to look and then drop in the pictures that you need printed. So templates can have multiple cells. We call these cells. This one has an A and a B cell, and this one has an AA cell. What does that mean? Well, if we drag a picture into a cell, you can see with an AA template that they both become the same. They're both A. If we use an AB and then drag in 2 pictures, then you can see that the first image is taken into the first cell and the second image is taken into the second cell. You can also do this with many pictures. So if you choose 100 pictures by, for instance, if you have a folder with 100 and you do Control A, Command A, then you have 100 pictures selected and you could just drag them on here and drop them, and then you have 100 pages added to your template. Because I added these, I now have more than one page. So as soon as I have more than one page, this one becomes active and you can see how many pages you have. Now notice how all of these images were automatically rotated to best fit. That's because auto rotate was on. I don't have to do that, but auto rotate means that I'm not able to manually rotate them because I don't have to, because the computer knows, the software knows how to rotate best. So if I don't want to do that, and for instance I want this one to be printed portrait, I could switch off auto rotate and then simply rotate it manually. Notice also that this one fills, so that means I have a slider that controls where I will choose to crop, because of course my picture is not portrait, it's a landscape picture. So I can decide where I want it printed exactly. Or I could choose fit, and that would make all the pictures fit into the cell instead of fill. Usually that's most logical to do that on all prints, because you hardly ever want to do one in fit and rest in fill, or the other way around, so they all switch when you change that. Fill is the most common way to do it because you get the nicest full-size pictures. So we can delete those pages as well. If we look at this, when we decide we don't want this page, we can simply say delete, and it will bring back the number of pages to 2. Again, we can nest these. So if I want these printed on a roll, I could nest them. If I want to print these on sheets, you usually don't use nest, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to nest on a sheet, because then you use a different template. But you could. If you wanted to, you could nest a small print onto a sheet. So you could have an A4 sheet and a very small print and nest those onto the sheet without worrying how many will fit, because the software will take care of that. Okay, the other functions in templates. Because there are many of them, and you can define up to 500, so that should be enough, you have a filter here to decide which size. So 10 by 15 would be a common one. This is a single cell 10 by 15. So if I want to print all these files as 10 by 15, I select all of them and I drag them on here. And then I have 5 pages with 1 on each page. Of course, I set no auto rotate, because now I get odd pictures. So I can do auto rotate on and delete them and redo it. Let's do the last one as well. Okay, and then select all of them again and drag them on here. And now we do have pages that actually fill up the page. Notice that there's still a white edge around it, because we didn't say borderless. We can print borderless though. It's very easy. You click borderless and every image is expanded just to the right amount to get it to be borderless. So that means you won't lose more than 1 or 2 millimeters on the edges of your picture. So that's a minimum loss. And you see what you're losing, because this is pretty much what you will lose. So it's very easy to print borderless. Then let me see what else I have here. I have the print information. If I have a cell with multiple cells and some space below those images, let me find one that has those on, because not all of them have it on. Probably not on the small one, so I'll go to a bigger one, A4. Those should have it. Yeah, this one. So this one has 2 more square pictures on a single sheet with some green box below it. That green box is actually the print information. And if we drag into images and drop them there, we could have the file name of those images printed below them. So that means we could say here, print the file name under it, or print the date under it, if we just want to have the date under it. Or we could say I want a custom text there, and then enter any text we want to be printed on there. So there's different ways of adding more information, and you can decide if you want this on a template, yes or no, in the template editor, which we will cover in the next section of the video. Okay, then edge lines. You can have a line created around the edges of the cells. So if I do edge line, you see a green line appear here of 2. And 2 means 2 pixels. So that's 2 pixels of your image. So it's usually a hairline if you do 1. 2 is a bit bigger. 4 is quite a big, thick line. So we didn't add much options here, and we exaggerate slightly how it will look, but you get the general idea of it being bigger when you choose a higher value. And you can do that, of course, in a color that you choose. Then, instead of edge lines, we can also do cut marks. So if we want to have cut marks at the end of the page, because we want to print this on a roll or on a sheet that's larger than our template, we could do it this way. Then we can choose how long those are, the cut lines, so we can have 5mm cut lines up to 10mm cut lines. If you like bigger cut marks, do it this way. Or you could choose to have them on the cells. So that means every cell can be cut individually. And then you probably want to go for a small cut mark. Okay, so that is the template. Now there are many templates available, and you can also add your own. So if you want to add your own templates, you can go to the template editor, and then you can define a new template and start working on that. So if I want to make one new, I can define that I want a certain size. So let's make it a new template, and that will show me the one that I chose last with some added cells to it. So if I don't want these cells, I can simply say, okay, well, delete that. So delete that one and delete that one. So this is a blank page, almost blank now. There we are, now it's blank. So we got one cell, and we can create the height and the width of each cell, and we define the template size here at the top. So now we're using a template page size of 330 by 483, so that's an A3 plus. We can also use the predefined sizes. So if we want to do 70 by 100, we can do that, and then give it a name that makes more sense to us. So 70 times 100 custom, and I'll say save. And now we have that as a template as in our list. So let's go to the 7. Where are we? 70 times 100 custom, there we are. And we can add cells to it. So there's different ways of doing that. We can simply say new, and that would create a standard cell of the last one that we did create. Or we could enter the size before we make one, so we could delete it and then say I want one created at 5 millimeters from the top left corner, and I want it to be 100 millimeters square, and then say new, and that would add that cell. That would just add one cell. You can do more cells, of course. So if you need to have a sheet with, for instance, 5 rows and 6 columns, 5 rows, 6 columns, then you could do that using the matrix function. So if we delete that one and say we want 5 columns, 3 rows with a spacing of 5 millers in between, and we say new, then we get those automatically. That makes it a lot easier to make a template that's a bit more complex. You could change the size of your template after you've added cells. If you think, well, this is enough, you could make the template page size smaller and save it again, just to save on paper. And if I want to start using this one, I can simply save it and then go to templates and use it. Now notice that there are group letters indicated here, and they're all A. So if I want to do multiple pictures, I can say I want to do a here, a B there, and a C there, and a D there. Well, you get the drift. It's possible to select any images you want, and I could say save, and now I can go to templates and look up my 70 by 100. Well, it's still active, so I could have 5 pictures selected, drag them onto cell A, and it would fill up all the images, because this is A, B, C, D, E, and those are all B, so it fills up with B. So that's how easy it is to use templates with a new template. But don't make a template for every different combination of specific sizes that you want to print, because nesting is much faster for that, and you won't end up with hundreds of templates. So use templates for things that you know are going to save you time. If nesting is going to save you time, use nesting instead of templates. Okay, next topic would be wall art. Wall art is a module we put in not to print, but to visualize. Because if you want to sell a large format print, you need to convince your customer of a specific print on a specific size. And the bigger you can print it, the better margin you can make on it. So it makes sense for you to be able to show to a customer how small a print would look in their room, so you can expand on the size and sell more print. So what we've done here is when you select a picture, it shows the picture in relation to a room. And this is just a room, because we got a predefined set of rooms here that you can simply choose, and you will see the image there. And you can actually set the size of the picture with either a slider or by entering a value. And then it shows the picture on the wall. Now, of course, you want to do this on the picture of the room of your customer, who's going to be hanging the picture on their wall. So they can come in to your store, to your print center, and import or bring to you, give to you, email to you on, or give it on a USB stick or whatever, send you a room picture that they take like this, so straight looking at the wall where the picture is going to be. And then you can import that here. Any picture, TIFF or JPEG will work. And it will add it to the list of selectable rooms. So then you can select that room. And if this customer knows that this couch is 1 meter 80, I can say I want to adjust the size. And I know that this dimension to this dimension, which is at near the wall, is actually 180 centimeters. So then if I make my print 180 centimeters, then it is exactly the same size as my couch. And then you can start to think about, okay, this is a nice size for this print, this is how I want to print it. You can, of course, have multiple images that people consider to be buying, and then you could do a save of this picture. I could save it onto our desktop, for instance, and we could choose a different picture because they might be thinking about choosing this picture instead, and save that as well. And then you have on your, well, I already did that before, but then you have 2 files on there that you can actually print or email to your customer, so they can make a selection between the one they like. So you can take it home, discuss it there, have a look, and then decide and come back and buy it from you. So a very nice way to present art in a way that it actually makes sense to a user, because most users have no idea what 90 centimeters is. They cannot imagine how it will look. So now you can say, okay, it's going to be 90 centimeters. Well, this is what it will be, 90 centimeters. If you like this size, that's fine. If you want it smaller, make it larger, whatever you want. So that is the wall art module. Then the art on demand, which maybe is the most unique feature in Gemini 12. Because art on demand allows the Gemini 12 user to start printing from art libraries without having the high resolution version files of those art libraries. So how does that work? Well, in the cloud we have stored, encoded, protected artwork libraries. Those are accessible through Titan. So you can search those libraries using keywords. So if I want to, for instance, see something that is related to London, I could do search on London, and I would get the results of all the images that are related to London back. And those are, in this case, 31 images. So I can just browse through those, and if I think, oh, that's one I really like, then I can choose that. Now, I don't have the high resolution file of this picture. That's only available in the cloud. But if I want to order it from this system, I can. And I can search for it by name, category, artist, orientation, or I can just use a color keyword or whatever tags there is added to those pictures. And then you can find it, and if you do a submit, then you are allowed to set a size for it. So if this is the picture I want, I can now set a size. It takes on the original size that we have from the stored version. And then you can say, okay, I want to print it a little bit bigger. This is a little too small for my taste. Let's make it 80. Nope, that's not 80. Let's make it 80. Well, maybe 120. And then we have it at 120 centimeters, which is a nice size for this wall. We can choose the paper, like an Epson canvas. We can have an edge around it, which could be mirrored, 3 millimeters or 3 centimeters. And if the customer likes this, we can say place the order. Now, of course, a lot of customers will want to know what does it cost before they'll say, okay, I'll take that one. Most customers want to know a price. So in preferences, we have the option within the art on demand preference. I'll go over the preferences later on, but this is more logical to use this one explaining to you the art on demand module. So if you do the show pricing and you set the pricing for a square meter to 140, I'm just making an example here, and go back to wall art, then you will see the price of this one is 287. That's just a print. You can add prices manually to it for framing, for shipping, for whatever you want. But you have a base price and it's instantly calculated as you define the size. So if a customer says, well, I don't have a budget over 250, you can say, well, we can go back in size to 100 and then it's within your budget. And even one, no, that's too much, 110 maybe. Yep, that's nicely within budget. So there's ways of showing the customer exactly what he will get at what price he will get it. And once we're happy, we just do place order. And what happens now is that we place the order in the cloud, and the high resolution file is then downloaded from the cloud, not as a file, but streamed to our printer. So it's never in any risk of being copied, because it only arrives at the printer once, and it cannot even be reprinted out of the printer. So we click on OK here, and then we get something else. Because it's art, we get a certificate of authenticity that automatically has all the information of the file on it. It could also have printed by filled in, which is one of the preferences, so you can have the company name that prints it on there, and they can even have their logo on here automatically. So very nice to present it. And to show you that it did do something, I will go to the server view in a few minutes, because it takes a few minutes for those files to process. They're big files, and once it's been processed, there'll be a job with this particular one in our P10000 printer waiting for us to be loading the media and say print. So a very easy way of selling art, of presenting art, of visualizing how it will look in a customer's room, all integrated into the production system. I think that's definitely the most unique part about this solution. There are no RIPs out there that do anything like this. So to be able to visualize art on demand in a safe way and then have it produced is very powerful. What is even possible is to do art on demand remotely. So if you don't have a printer, but you have a gallery, you could have Titan run in your gallery, and you could do this kind of selection and visualization, and then have it printed at your Gemini12 print center that you are hooked up to. And hooked up to means just that you both have internet connection, and you made an agreement that you can print on each other's system, so on the Gemini12 system of that customer. So that means you log in your preferences as a gallery with the username and password that you got, and that will give you access to the art library, but also will know that you're printing at the specific Gemini12 customer. So when you do a submit order, it will be generating an order at the customer where you have the link with. So let's view if the job actually arrived. So we'll go to View Server, and at the top, latest job, we can see our canvas print, and if we double click it, we can see it. It is actually the right size, it's got the edge around it, so it's all ready to be printed. So that's Art on Demand. So the final tab that remains is the Preferences tab. And preferences are, of course, for setting some parameters that you want to be able to set but don't set all the time, so it's a specific tab. Reference prints, let's start with that one. When we install a Gemini12 system, we make sure that everything is working okay, and when we have profiled your system and installed the ICC profiles, we will type in your customer name. So I'll just type in customer, and we'll say this was done by me, so I'm Manuel, and we'll say print, which will generate a print, a reference print of a known image to our system to verify that everything is operating as it should be. Because if I go to View Server and then look at the job, which is now nested together with this one, because it's this tiny job. So what I'll do is I'll switch off nesting. That's probably easiest. Well, let's double click this anyway. I'll take it out of the nest. I can do that too. So reference print, I move out of the nest, and then I double click the nest reference print. So this is the reference print that I did. And as you can see, it has some images on there, color, black and white, has some color bars on here, has a black limit and a white limit, and a reference color strip. And we actually measure this color strip using software and a spectrophotometer to verify that the system is printing within the specified limits of color range. So when you get a system that we install, you get something that works exact and is the same on all your printers, as far as possible, of course. So that's reference print. Then borderless enlargement, it is a parameter, but you don't really need to change it for normal printers because 6mm works fine on every print that we have on an Epson printer. So it's a minimum waste and it never gives you white lines. If you do want to have a larger enlargement, so lose more of your image, you can enter a higher value. Entering a lower value I would not recommend because you run the risk of getting a white line around your printed one or two edges. Watermarks. It's possible to print a watermark over your image. So if I go to free layout, for instance, you can see there's already a watermark of International Graphics. Let's go to an image that doesn't have a watermark. So I'll go back to one of my wedding pictures, that one. And then if I go back to preferences and switch on watermark and say this is for demo only, I can put demo in here and I can say it's 50% opaque, and I go back to the free layout, then I have demo written across it. So you can actually print it, give it to a customer, and you don't have to worry about them actually using it as a commercial print. Then in the same way you can add a logo to your image. So I could say I want to logo print it and I want to print it at the top left at 10% of the print size. So now if we go to free layout, we see a logo. You might be able to see it, it's a bit small. Let's go back and make it bigger just to show you. We'll make it 40% of the width. And there we have the logo at the top left corner. So if you want to make prints that promote a certain brand, you can have a logo of that brand placed on the images that you print. Or it could be an event logo or whatever you want to have printed there. You can decide down the position, so I can also do that at the bottom right. And then if I go to free layout, it's actually placed at the bottom right. Then we have resolution. When you use images that are too unsharp on the size you're printing them, Titan will give you a warning. So any image that you try to print under 100, because that's our lower limit, will give you a warning. I can demonstrate that if I go to free layout and say I want to print this one at, let's say, 1200. Well, that would still work on this one because it's a fairly big file. So let's make a print of a smaller file. Let's see if one of them is small. This one's a lot smaller, I think. So let's make this one 1200. It's only 76 dots per inch. So when I try to print now, it will say this is only 76 dots per inch. You sure you want to print this? Sometimes you do. Sometimes you don't have more resolution and you don't want to say no to the customer, but you at least are warned that it might be unsharp. Then the rendering resolution is the way the images are actually transmitted if you place them on a template. If you don't place them on a template and use free layout, you get the full image that you sent. So you get 1200 dpi if you send that. If you use templates, all images are calculated back to a resolution that makes sense for the printer, like 360 on an Epson printer, because that's very sharp and it's also an exact value of the resolution. So a resolution of an Epson is 360, 720, 1440, 2880. So if you use a factor that's actually related to that value, you get a sharper print. So just leave it as it is for all Epson printers. That is that tab. Then the final one is some art on demand related preferences. I already told you in the art on demand section that we have the ability to have different usernames have access to different libraries. So you can simply define your username and password and then log in. When you log in, you will get publishers here. So just to demonstrate that we have multiple publishers, if I do the demo AOD publisher and then go to art on demand, and then do a search, I would not have to search London because that wouldn't be in there. I can do a search generically because it's a small library. I just get the images that are in this library. So this one's always available. If you download Titan, you will normally not have a username that allows you to go into the IG subset, because that has to be approved. Because IG has very strict conditions on how you can print and who can print, to avoid people right next to each other printing the same art library. So once you are approved for IG or whatever other art library you want to apply for, then you get a username password combination that allows you to choose that particular art library. The printed by is for the certificate. I've shown you the certificate. If you enter a text there, printed by, you can have a company name there. Then it would add it on there, and you can have the date printed, yes or no. If you don't want the date printed because you're printing in advance and then selling them after, you don't print a date on there, because then the certificate would have an old date. So you print a certificate without a date. And you can have a logo printed on it, so you can load up a PNG version of your logo and it will be placed on the certificate. Show pricing, I showed you that in the wall art module. And the downloaded art folder is just where all the images that you download from the cloud are stored, so you have previews of those on your system. The advantage of that is you can easily navigate to it, and then people can choose between the ones they have selected. So here's my last one. I selected the one with the phone booth, and I can see the other ones that are available here as well. So it's easier to navigate through the ones you've chosen before. Then the bottom part I won't discuss here, because this is very specific to a user that wants to create their own art library. So on a normal user, you wouldn't even be seeing these windows. These are just available for those who want to create their own art libraries, because that's one of the other powerful features of Gemini 12. You can create your own art libraries. You can store the artwork of people that you work with, artists that you work with or want to work with, in the cloud, encoded, safe, and then create username password combinations that allow specific Gemini 12 systems to print those. So if an artist says, I only want you and that company to be able to print it, you can create an art library and have those two Gemini 12 centers be able to print on that system using Art on Demand in Titan. So these are then available to import the tags. You can see that we had a tag for London and color red and a tag to our images. You can set those here by importing an Excel file. So if you want to create your own, we will explain to you how to create an Excel file that works with the import. And then you can do that even in 4 different languages, because that's the languages that we support. So that is an overview of Gemini 12. Now, I can understand that you might have specific questions or comments. Feel free to contact us. If you want a demonstration of the system, contact us. If you want more information or you want to have a look at the Titan client and you want a link for that, let us know. You'll see this picture, this video, because you're already on the website, so you'll know where to go. But feel free to contact us in any case. So I'd like to thank you for watching, and look forward to seeing you somewhere on a Gemini event or at an installation. Thank you. Bye-bye.